Did you know that milk, which has been touted as essential to our health for decades, may not be as good for us as we once thought? Recent studies have shown that the health benefits of milk may be greatly exaggerated. So why have we been sold this white lie for so long? Today we'll explore the history of milk consumption and the controversy surrounding the dairy industry. Join us as we uncover the truth behind the milk we've all been drinking. And ask yourself this question: have we been sold a myth, or is milk truly essential to our diets? Stick around. Evolution of milk. The large milk corporations and the strong dairy farming lobbies appear to have sold us a lot of lies. To begin with, the calcium cabal persuaded an entire generation that the cow's teat is a sacred source of healthy, white nutrients through astute marketing and covert promotion. But the outcomes of scientific studies today on milk are, to put it mildly, surprising. Even the most fundamental presumption that milk is inherently healthy has been proven far from true. But first, let's examine the evolution of milk up to the present. If you look around, you'll discover that many people enjoy milk, but when you think about it, it seems strange to drink it. We must squirt the liquid from the cow's udders to obtain it. It is a substance produced by cows or other animals to nourish their offspring. And it all started after domesticating animals during the Neolithic Revolution, or the advent of agriculture, where humans were the first to habitually ingest the milk of other mammals. From as early as 9000 to 7000 BC in Mesopotamia to 3500 to 3000 BC in the Americas, this evolution took place separately in different parts of the world. Although domestic cattle had individually evolved from wild aurochs populations numerous times before, domestic cattle were initially domesticated in Southwest Asia, along with the most significant dairy animals: cows, sheep, and goats. Animals were initially raised for their flesh, and archaeologist Andrew Sherrod hypothesized that dairying and using domestic animals for labor and hair came much later. And now, after consuming dairy for a few thousand years, people's genes truly changed. Suddenly, they developed enzymes that could aid in breaking down and digesting milk, so they forced evolution to make them milk tolerant. Unfortunately, since milk spoiled so fast, drinking raw milk straight from the cow's udder wasn't the safest option for the consumers.
Skip breakfast, did we?
It becomes a cozy breeding place for microorganisms as it sits around, which is again great for making cheese, but somewhat harmful for anyone consuming it. Yet Louis Pasteur devised a way to eliminate dangerous bacteria and lengthen the shelf life of popular drinks in 1864. And because of the invention of pasteurization, it was now safe to consume it. Pasteurization is a heat treatment procedure that eliminates pathogenic bacteria in a selection of foods and drinks. The economics and government policy. The history of milk is relatively brief compared to the history of humans, but it is utterly fascinating. The evolution of milk in our contemporary society contains all these elements. Think of power, greed, corruption, and mass deception. Isn't it odd that animal milk changed from being inedible to some of us developing the ability to digest it? Then something that resembled a microorganism perfect environment. While pasteurization helped to remedy that problem, in the early 1900s in the United States of America, milk had become a magically perfect white beverage. A period would change everything for the globe and milk's role when several events occurred just in time. The demand for milk skyrocketed throughout the world wars. During World War, several government support systems that would keep dairy viable into the 21st century were created. It was a result of a dire need at the time.
Milk?
At the time, increased milk production was required in the United States to produce processed dairy products that could be sent to men fighting overseas. Yet due to inadequate compensation, farmers could not produce enough to satisfy this demand. The government then reasoned that by providing milk to kids, they had successfully created a market for fluid milk and could thus produce the processed goods required for soldiers. Suddenly, milk was a symbol of freedom, liberty, and nationalism. Do you see how America popularized milk? So farmers completely converted their operations to dairy now that they had the United States government as a significant new customer. They had to satisfy this desire. War, therefore, played a role. Convenience played a role too. Cow's milk was viewed as a practical option to provide newborns with nutrients if mothers couldn't be at home, breastfeeding all the time as more people moved into cities and more women began working outside the home. Yet as the dairy sector expanded, producers were motivated to increase demand by receiving government subsidies for dairy. An excellent example of milk that was frequently advertised was the goat milk. It was hard to open a magazine in the 1990s or the early 2000s without seeing the dairy face of a famous person smirking back at you. When fluid milk consumption was at its lowest point in decades, the Got Milk advertisements helped increase demand for the dairy product. Built on the concept that milk fosters strong, healthy bones, the expression "milk des a body good" became synonymous with the beverage. Although the war was over, dairy farmers were still left with a tremendous surplus of dairy, and the government pushed people to drink more because it didn't want to harm the farmers. Despite government-funded programs to get practically every American demographic to consume more milk, the surplus persisted. President Jimmy Carter even authorized the 4-year, $2 billion infusion of federal funds into the dairy sector in 1977. To take advantage of these government subsidies, dairy farmers increased production as in the past, leading to an even bigger surplus. This soon-to-rot milk was homogenized into government cheese, stored in enormous underground facilities spread across 35 states, and allowed to decay. If you've ever had it, you would soon forget the government cheese flavor. It had a flavor that fell halfway between Velveeta and American cheese and smelled either of shame or appreciation for those who couldn't afford to refuse it. It was an attractive pale orange color. Also, it arrived in recognizable stacks of 5-pound blocks that immediately made it evident that it wasn't your typical camembert or cheddar. The cheese, which was given out by a government program during a period of volatile milk production in the 1980s recession, is still remembered with bitterness by both those who had to eat it and those who were never given a chance to. And once the government started determining prices for goods, it became difficult to turn back. That's okay for some industries such as insurance, electricity, and utilities, where government involvement is necessary. But milk? It's merely a product that people have the option of purchasing or not. Regrettably, despite the force's best efforts to convince us otherwise, people eventually started to take less of it. As a result, the demand for milk began to decline, but the dairy lobby remained steadfast. Then they began using new strategies to persuade us to consume milk. Why not eat it instead of drinking it? And the dairy lobby achieved this by collaborating with fast food chains to provide us with cheesy items. You can't see it, but the dairy lobby is actively working on adding additional cheese to these goods in all this cheesy advertising. Products. There is only one food, milk, that encompasses every food group. But even the dairy industry admits that drinking milk is unnecessary for good health. They cannot dispute that reality. Their response is that the most practical source of calcium is milk and dairy products, but even that justification is no longer valid. As we all know, the USDA is responsible for developing dietary recommendations and supporting agriculture. There is a concern there. The dairy industry's health recommendations are accepted, but they run a food company much like Coca-Cola or any other. We don't generally believe that Coke wants to make the world a better place. We know they are a business whose primary goal is maximizing profits. However, we don't consider that when we read advertising for the dairy industry. There comes a time when a public health crisis brought on by a poor diet grips the United States. Dairy foods frequently receive a pass, even though most of the attention has been on the apparent offenders, such as sugary soft drinks and fast food. The government-supported dairy business has persuaded us of the advantages of milk and other dairy products for our health. However, the setting in which people consume dairy matters. How business and government promotes dairy junk foods sheds information on the movement in consumption habits away from plain milk and toward dairy products high in sugar, fat, and salt. Moreover, studies have recently revealed that drinking too much milk may harm your bones. Even though milk is so yummy, the dairy sector does not appreciate this. The idea that milk is a necessary dietary staple is a white lie we've all been sold. The health risks associated with dairy consumption, the marketing and politics behind the dairy industry, and the cultural significance of milk in our diets are all complex and multifaceted issues. But where do we go from here? Is it time to rethink our relationship with milk and dairy products? Are plant-based milk alternatives the answer? Or is there something else entirely that we haven't considered yet? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.